Hello, my name is Caroline Dettman, and I am here to show that despite living in the most extraordinary and most daunting of experiences, that America is going to come together and have her back anyway. Now, I believe this so much that I actually staked my entire career on it. Last year, I opted to walk away from a 25-year successful career in corporate America. Why? To become a female entrepreneur when I co-founded a gender equity consultancy. Now, talk about daunting. Female entrepreneurs only get 3%, less than 3% of investment dollars from VCs, and yet my partners and I, we were able to get investments anyway. Now here's us celebrating our launch. Now don't we look so happy? This was back in September. We had no idea that within 4.5 months, we would be facing down this global pandemic, right? If we had, we would have looked less joyful and more like this. Oh my God, what have we done? What have we done? Because this pandemic is really hurting all businesses, but particularly small business. And yet, just 7 months after the launch of our small business, we are working with some of the biggest companies in the world to tackle gender equity and diversity differently and authentically. Now, that's indicative, I think, of one very important thing, which is that while our small business, we're figuring out how to persevere anyway. And it's based on something true, which is that if you look over history, no matter how high the odds are stacked against women, we prevail anyway. Now, here we are, and here's the challenge. Gender equity is improving in corporate America at an abysmally slow rate, at 1% improvement each year. Now, it is not for a lack of trying. In fact, companies are throwing a lot at diversity and inclusion initiatives. But here's the thing, they are not landing as intended. This is hard stuff because we are talking about correcting systemic behavior, right? Now, having said that, companies that are taking more focused, more creative, and more bold actions, they are improving at 3 times the rate as their competitors. We need more of that, please. Okay? But here's what we're up against. The World Economic Forum has said that it is going to take us 208 more years to reach pay parity. And that was prior to the pandemic. And if we're honest, America's workplaces run rampant with discrimination, and it goes way beyond gender. I'm talking, of course, of race and sexuality and ability, both physical and mental, age, religion. I could go on. And this is despite companies' commitments to inclusion. So when COVID-19 hit and America shut down, everyone was asking the same question. When are things going to go back to normal? We were asking the wrong question. The question we need to be asking is, why would we even want it to? So now we are months into this pandemic, and the pandemic has made it hard for everyone, but it absolutely has shown that it discriminates against working women. If you look at the most hard-hit, most vulnerable sectors during the pandemic, women make up the majority of those workforces. I'm talking about travel and hospitality and entertainment and education and retail. Women also make up 77% of the type of work that can't be done remotely, if at all, during the shutdown. I'm talking about domestic workers. I'm talking about personal care services. I'm talking about childcare, right? And because of that, look, the unemployment rate is scarily skyrocketing for all, but women's unemployment rate is outpacing men's, okay? And of that, it is Hispanic women who are the hardest hit, followed by Black women. And now we find ourselves, working parents particularly, are asking a really tough question, because as businesses are now reopening, but childcare and schools are not until the fall and potentially later. Can working parents continue to both work and take care of their children? And in that question, two big factors emerge. Number one, working women are still doing the lion's share of both the childcare and the housework during this pandemic, unfairly. Also, because of a lifetime of pay inequity, women are more likely to make less than their partners. So, if there is a career that is at risk of being collateral damage during the pandemic, then it is women's. But I'm here to tell you we're not going to let that happen. Because I've now spoken about some of the realities of this pandemic that look to take equity backwards. But I want to spend the bulk of our time together talking about the realities that are actually going to have us jump forwards anyway. And for that, I want to talk to you about a mentor to me, an overall badass entrepreneur, Miss Cindy Gallop, who 2 years ago was asked the question of what it was going to take to finally achieve diversity and inclusion in corporate America. Here's what she said. Only one thing: complete, total, utter fucking disaster. Now, apologies to Cindy because that was a horrific British accent. However, what she said remains true. And this is also what she said. And now we have it, right? We are here. We are in total, utter fucking disaster. So what can we do in this moment? Well, here's the thing. There is historical precedent for women jumping forward during disaster. And for that, I want to bring you back to 1918, post-World War I, and the suffragettes are trying to get the vote, and they get defeated to get women's right to vote. Now, according to the New York Times and the history books, they will tell you that one of the main reasons that it failed to pass in 1918 was because the American senators weren't comfortable with all women voting, particularly black women. So the suffragettes and all women who wanted this to pass knew they had a giant job to do. And did they have a lot planned in which to do it? Social gatherings, campaigning, big events. And then in comes the Spanish flu. And every type of social gathering, much like today, came to an abrupt halt. The frustration in that moment is so beautifully captured by this suffragette in 1918 who said this: everything conspires against women's suffrage. Now it is the influenza. Now listen, I so feel this woman. I feel her, because you take out suffrage and you replace influenza with COVID-19, it's as relevant today. But look, spoiler alert, we know the vote passed, right? The 19th Amendment succeeded. So what happened to make that so? The reality of the Spanish flu meant that there was so much sickness in America that the desperation for nurses was at an all-time high. And where they were needed is important, because they weren't needed on the battle lines overseas in other countries. They were needed in America's homes. They were needed in America's streets. And for the first time, the Red Cross reversed its hesitation to have black nurses on those front lines. And nurses, all nurses, risked their lives to help the sick and the dying. And leading in to that vote in 1920, the senators saw women's value in a different way. All women, right? So the Spanish flu, which looked to actually take the suffragettes backward, was actually a time where actually they succeeded anyway. Now, we're talking about 100 years ago, and I'm not just saying that I'm hoping history just repeats itself, right? Not far from it. In fact, our consultancy did a study on the American workforce culture during COVID-19. And we found 3 emerging factors that give me and give us hope and reasons to be optimistic. The number one workplace bias against women is now being confronted and accepted by both sexes for the very first time. I'm talking about remote working. And prior to this pandemic, women that worked from home, particularly if you are a working mother, The bias was that you could not possibly be productive if you had children. The other thing that was held against women working from home was that you needed that office face time in order to advance your career. Now, this happened to me. When I was on maternity leave 17 years ago, I asked to come back to work full-time, but one day from home. I was given an unequivocal no, because it would become, as they said, a huge HR issue. Now, it might not surprise you that I persisted anyway. And I did get to work from home that one day a week, but it is not lost on me that my career likely was set back because of it. And the fact that over these years and up until this pandemic, women that even asked to work from home, right, risked their careers too. Now the pandemic comes, remote working is accepted everywhere, and it's been proven that you can be hella productive working from home, but also that you never have to actually set foot in an office to achieve that office face time. Now, this is good for all, but it is particularly great for working women. And actually, our study found that 87% of working dads said that women's career advancement opportunities were going to most excel, particularly after having children, because of now the acceptance of remote working. Reason to be optimistic, number 2, and that is corporate leaders are experiencing an empathy that just didn't exist prior to this pandemic. And I'm talking about the fact that they are remote working many times for the first time. Some are doing that as working parents, which means they do not have the resources that they're used to having. But even if they don't, because of the explosion of video conferencing, they are in the homes of every person they work with and every person that works for them. And you cannot ignore the struggle that is this juggle. And because of that, we're seeing more empathy in our leadership in ways large and small. Just the other day, my husband, he's a beer executive, he was talking on the phone to a sports league executive. And I hear him say, hey, look, let's cut this short, go watch Frozen with the kids, and we'll just pick this back up tomorrow. And I thought to myself, that would have been unthinkable prior to this pandemic, but now it is a sign of more profound, empathetic leadership to come. And then third, and maybe most powerful factor of all, is that culture is on equity's side. And culture is real persuasive on corporate America. So we asked Americans, what is the number one issue that companies need to be solving? Across every single demographic, the number one answer for the very first time was equal opportunity and equal pay for a company's own employees. And that laid over the former number one answers, which are things like reducing poverty in the world or protecting the environment. And look, companies have done incredibly bold actions, right, in terms of reducing their environmental footprints, in terms of helping the communities in which they do business. And those will continue. The reason why they do this is, yes, it's the right thing to do, but more importantly, it is because culture rewards them for that behavior. Well, now, culture is telling companies the behavior they most want to reward, and that is treating your own employees equitably. So look, here we are. We're in this COVID-19 reality show that none of us wanted to be in, and yet all of us have starring roles. We must also remember, though, that this reality show is one in which the old rules no longer apply. And in fact, companies are already in rebuild mode. It's never been a better time for companies, though, to rebuild for better. But we cannot just hope that this happens. As we saw when the American economy shut down, it was far from equitable. So we have to rally together to ensure that America's reboot and that the long-term corporate America is. I know there is a lot of outrage right now, and rightly so. But if we want to achieve equity for all, we have to channel that outrage into an outrageous plan. And I use the word outrageous because it is going to take a collective audacity to create real change. I think we're up for it though. So look, if anyone out there still doubts whether America is going to come together and have her back, I'll say this: it's never scared us and it's never stopped us before. And I'm pretty sure that when the history books look back at 2020, yes, it's going to be the year of the pandemic. And yes, it's going to be the year of civil unrest. But I believe that it's also going to be the year that really kicked off authentic, real change once and for all for equity for all. Thank you.